Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 177 of I Wish You Were Dead, the podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, and that is Gavin and Thea. And friends, have you guys ever just decided that you were going to be really annoying about something that you were happy about?
Yes,
Yeah.
quite often.
So I've had, okay. So Gavin, what about you?
Like, I guess it depends. Like an event, like something that happened that I am happy about.
It could be like an event, something that you got, something big about your life, like anything.
Oh, I mean, I talk about my kid all the time.
Okay, so I mean that's a normal one.
I feel like that counts.
So for me, I've had this experience just recently where, like 2 weeks ago, I did not know what this product was. But I recently came into possession of something called a Ninja Creamy, which
Okay. Is it like a food chopper?
not exactly. It like I suppose if you want to stretch some definitions, like that might technically count. But it makes ice cream.
Oh.
And when I tell you I have decided I'm going to be so annoying about this product, I've used it twice now, and it is incredible. I don't know how it does it. I don't know how it makes it so incredibly creamy, and yet I can cram like 60 grams of protein into like a pint of ice cream. Like
Wow.
it is,
Hmm.
it is an incredible machine. I've decided I'm going to be telling everybody about my recipes, even if they don't want to hear it.
Hashtag not
I
sponsored, by the way.
no, not. I wish they would reach out. I had to buy this used off of somebody at work. By just sheer coincidence, I happened to be in the room while she was talking about how she had like three of them and had to get rid of one. It's incredible. So I just want everyone to know that the Ninja Creamy is fantastic. I love mine. I've got one ready to go as soon as we're done with the podcast today. I'll be making another one.
Excellent.
And I'm going to be
Nice.
so incredibly annoying to everybody in my life about it. I've got some cinnamon roll ice cream coming up with like cookie chunks in it.
Heck yeah, man.
It's fantastic. So there you all go. I want you all to be aware of that. That's all I can really think about today.
Well, I hope you have a today in history. Hopefully, it's related. Maybe something about the history of ice cream. I don't know. But
That would be a good idea.
yeah. Before we get too far rolling into things, just a couple like quick heads up. It is very stormy and rainy where I am, so sorry if you hear that in the background. I think Mike and Fia are both also getting some of that, so it's just bad weather on the East Coast, kind of up and down. And then I'm also sick, as you've probably heard me cough while laughing, a couple times already. Sorry. I'm coming off of a sinus infection. Thanks, daycare, for that. But yeah, so I'm definitely going to cough a bit throughout this episode. I'm going to do my best to catch it in the edit, but sorry. So yeah, the audio in this entire episode might just be kind of funky, but anywho, Fia,
we're here and we're doing it.
Yeah, we're here. We're doing it. I say let's. This might be a longer episode because we're talking about a real weird group of dinosaurs today. So let's, I guess, get right into our different sort of opening sections. Fia, if you could keep some house for us, please.
Yes, sir. So don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on and to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to give us feedback about the show and any future topics you would like to hear on the pod. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, be sure to fill out our guest forms, and all that can be found in the show notes. And so, Gavin, what is next episode topic?
Yeah, we are talking about the Pleistocene epic. Sort of continuing our series of talking about all the different slices of Earth's history. This one, I think the last episode in this series with the Pliocene, I called Basically Yesterday. This is actually yesterday. So this is the slice of geologic time right before the current one that we're in, more commonly known as the Ice Age, famous for mammoths and saber-toothed cats and things like that. So we're going to be talking all about that in 2 weeks.
Cool. Another housekeeping thing is that I am guest hosting a webinar series. It's called the Nature Coast Currents, founded and run by my advisors, Dr.
If he is cheating on us.
I am. I'm double dipping. But yeah, my advisors, Dr. Laura Reynolds and Dr. Savannah Berry, they started this webinar series that are aimed to communicate and catalog research and monitoring relative to Florida's nature coast, which is the Gulf side, but especially within like the specific aquatic preserves that we work in, so the Nature Coast Aquatic Preserve and the Big Bend region. Talks are about 30 to 45 minutes plus Q&A and a focus on coastal and marine science topics. They're usually once a month on Wednesdays around, I think, 2 or 3 p.m. The webinars are always free, and there is a catalog of all the previous ones, so if there was something that you wanted to see in the archive, you can go back, and everyone's welcome. So yeah, we'll hopefully put the link to that in the show notes.
Heck yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, with that, Mike, go ahead and tell us what ice cream related thing happened today in history.
So, today, the ice cream related thing today in history, 1997, Ben & Jerry's introduced one of their famous flavors.
Which one?
I'm going to make you guess. Which one do you think it was?
See, all of the ones that I like are named after people who are like still alive.
Okay.
So none of those. Fish food?
It is fish food. Well
no
done.
Way, that's Liz's favorite, and she eats it like a psychopath.
She's a fish.
I mean, Liz is kind of a psychopath, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. I'm pretty sure she would take that as a compliment.
I'm not going to describe how she eats it, but however you think she eats it, it's worse.
I do want to give you guys one more thing here. There was a first spacewalk, whatever,
Ooh.
Don't care. Like, quick game of 20 questions here. A show that I'm pretty sure all three of us would have watched growing up premiered on this day in 2005.
2005?
Zoe 101.
It is not Zoe 101.
Is it Nickelodeon, though?
It is not Nickelodeon.
Disney?
It is Disney.
I was not a Disney kid.
It is not Hannah Montana.
Wizards of
I was
Waverly
not really
Place.
a Disney kid.
It was not Waverly Place.
Yeah, I got nothing. I watched like.
So this is going to be all on Fia.
Yeah.
Fia, you're in the right era. You're in the right.
Corey in the House.
It's not Corey in the House.
That's So Raven.
Not That's So Raven.
Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Oh!
The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Gavin, come on!
Gavin comes in from the top rope. Premiered on this day in 2005.
Fascinating. What a good show.
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed it. All right, I believe we're on the Fia now for some Seagrass Corner.
Yes. So for Seagrass Corner, I want to talk to you guys about Lucinidae, or hatchet shells. These are clams, marine bivalves. They live in saltwater, and they're known for their symbiotic relationships with sulfur oxidizing bacteria. They have a worldwide distribution. They're usually found buried in muddy sand or gravel, and they're typically rounded, thin, and like a white buff color. I feel like you can usually see them like on any beach you wash up to. There's like just these lucid clams. They're kind of just like your basic small tiny white shell. But these guys are cool to me because they have they host sulfur oxidizing bacteria, and that like basically makes them able to like do oxidation in like high anoxic environments. And so
that seems like it should be impossible.
No.
Not for bacteria.
Not for bacteria. Bacteria can do
There's
anything.
basically nothing that's impossible
Little
for
did
bacteria.
I know.
Yes. And so this allows them to fix carbon or store carbon in organic compounds, and then they can actually use those nutrients. So a lot of people have been talking about with climate change, like carbon fixation, like trying to store carbon like in the sediments and in like trees and stuff. This is like something cool that these clams can do. And so like these clams, they originated in the Silurian period, but they like diversified in the late Cretaceous alongside the evolution of seagrass and mangrove swamps.
That makes sense.
Which is right up my alley. And so today, like the seagrass and lucinic clams and their sulfur oxidizing bacteria form this like 3-way symbiosis where the seagrass sediments, they basically the seagrass traps sediment, and then it like builds up into this sulfide-rich organic matter, and then the Ucinid bacteria partnership can remove those sulfides, which are, by the way, toxic to seagrasses.
Yeah.
And so then the seagrass roots can actually provide oxygen to like support the clams.
Neat.
And so,
Yeah.
cool little relationship.
Yeah, the more like stuff I learn about microbes they're just crazy. Like,
Yeah, they're so
especially crazy. Like the more we learn about like our gut microbiomes, let alone those in other animals. Like, we don't even understand our own very well, let alone all the other animals. Yeah, there's just a lot of crazy stuff that bacteria get up to. But anywho, that is well beyond the scope of this podcast. I barely go outside vertebrates, let alone animals, let alone eukaryotes. So, but today we are focusing on one particular group of vertebrates, the Spinosaur dinosaurs. So, we've talked about theropod dinosaurs before on this podcast in episode 104, but we really only mentioned the Spinosaurs very briefly in that episode. I did like a control F on my notes from that episode, and there was literally like a single line, because that's just the theropods are an enormous group of dinosaurs. So Spinosaurs, or like the technical name is the family Spinosauridae, are a group of dinosaurs that generally are weird. They're very strange. We don't have a lot of them, and the ones we do have are generally known from pretty poorly preserved fossils, or in some cases, unfortunately, just teeth. Yeah, that's a real bummer, because as we'll talk about, mammals, you can get away with that, not so much with reptiles. But the first weird thing about them, like not even considering how they looked, how they lived, they're weird because they're pretty time restricted. We're not going to go much into their evolution into this episode, but they show up in the the middle of the early Cretaceous, so like around 130 million years ago, and then they are mostly extinct by the end of the early Cretaceous, around 100 million years ago. A couple of species hang on beyond that, but not very far, like only 93 million years ago or so. So these guys aren't even around for 40 million years, which in the grand scheme for, a large and like relatively famous group of dinosaurs is pretty uncommon. So like they don't even make it to the end Cretaceous mass extinction. So like they went extinct well before the big asteroid hit Earth.
Dang. And do we have hypotheses of why?
Potentially a lot of climate changing at the time. Continents were continuing to move around, and that was just doing some funky things with the climate. And then also potentially some introduction of, competition and things, which is partially a little bit why they're kind of weird. We'll talk about how they're weird and do weird stuff, and then we'll kind of circle back to that at the end.
Okay.
But yeah, so they're on top of being weird for being so like narrow in when they lived, they're also weird just generally with how they look. So what does a Spinosaur look like in general? Let's start with a general dinosaur shape that most people are familiar with: a duck. So picture a duck, and you're looking at it like from the side. You know how ducks have their legs like pretty far back on their body? It looks like they're very like front heavy.
Yeah.
Spinosaurs also have that going on. They look very front heavy and very goofy. Their necks are also very like duck-like, where they're held much more in like a big S shape, kind of going up, rather than like you think of like a T-Rex that has its head very much like forward and kind of in line with the neck for the most part. Spinosaurs definitely have a more upright head, which just inherently makes them look kind of ducky. But a little more seriously, let's take a non-bird dinosaur that most people are familiar with. For example, picture the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. And we're going to turn that into a Spinosaur.
Okay.
So if you're looking at it from the side, we'll go from the snout to the tail. First, a Spinosaur skull is much longer front to back and shorter top to bottom. So imagine like a crocodile face, but then make it a little taller. So it's not like flat across the top. It's more kind of rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically
Okay.
a Spinosaur mouth. Long, narrow. They also have a weird kind of notch in the upper jaw that's pretty distinctive. The lower jaw ends in like a rounded, enlarged section that like slots up into the notch in the upper jaw. It's kind of hard to describe without looking at a picture, but their jaws basically like slot together really tightly at the front. Put a pin in that for later.
Okay.
Their nostrils are generally moved toward the top of the snout instead of like at the tip of it. And in some species, the nostrils are also moved back toward the eyes. The eyes are also generally moved from the side of the head up to the top of the head. Put a pin in that for later. The teeth are also mostly pointy cones rather than the sort of like curved knife-shaped teeth of a lot of other carnivorous dinosaurs. They're also not really serrated. They're just like lots of cones that just are good at stabbing, not slicing. Put a pin in that for later.
Stabbing, not slicing.
Yes. Let's see. They also usually have some kind of bony crest on the top of their head. Nothing like really crazy or anything. Usually just like a tall ridge along the midline of the skull. Some were, bigger and showier than others, but that was definitely like a display feature. There are some dinosaurs where it's like hollow on the inside and it was used for sound. This is not that. This is purely just like an extra piece of bone for them to have some like real estate to make it turn colors and things.
Mm-hmm.
The neck, as I kind of mentioned, is quite a bit longer and generally not as like thick as like a T-Rex's. Because their head isn't nearly as like big and blocky, so they don't need all these muscles in the neck to support it. And like I said, the posture of it, instead of being out forward, was generally more upright, kind of like a duck or a goose. Compared to a T-Rex, the arms and hands are much bigger. That's not saying a lot, considering T-Rex has famously small arms. But Spinosaurs had like very, very big, beefy arms. They also all had 3 fingers that were all pretty large and muscular compared to a T-Rex's 2. And if you're looking at like the back of its hand, the finger where the pointer finger would be has a big, big claw on it. The others had claws on them, but the one on like the first finger, which is actually technically the thumb, but is very large. Like I said, the arms proportionally much bigger than the T-Rex, but that's not really saying much. And their arms were also kind of proportioned weird. Like, their upper arm bone was real long, and then their forearm was relatively shorter. So they had, like, just, like, long arms, but they were strangely proportioned.
Okay.
Many of them also had kind of, like, a big barrel-shaped body. Like, the body depth doesn't change a lot from like the chest area through the hips. That's also part of what gives them that kind of duck look, is that they're just very front heavy. So like their chest doesn't like slope much. All of them have like big bulky kind of barrel chests. And then the thing that gives the group its name, almost all of them have some kind of ridge along the back. This is made out of a part of bone in the vertebrae called a neural spine. This is the same part that's elongated in bison that give them like the big hump between their shoulders. For bison, that's for attaching muscles for their head. For Spinosaurs, this isn't just the front of their body, it is all the way down the body. Basically from the first couple like non-neck vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae, all the way through to the hips, all the way through to the end of the tail. In some, they were only a couple inches tall. In some of the crazier ones, they were over 3 feet tall. Just this section from the top of the vertebrae up to the top of it, 3 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
That's 3 feet tall. And how tall is the entire species here?
It depends. That particular species, from ground to, I guess, the top of that would be about 12. 12 to... depends on size estimates. Somewhere between 12 and 15.
Wow.
Yeah. In all of these species, it's not like each of these were separate and isolated. They would have been connected by skin and tissue and things to form like a big sail kind of across the back in the tail. Like I said, in some species, this was not very pronounced. You probably would see a bit of a ridge along the back. But in others, they have just 3 feet of a sail, and they call it a sail for a reason, because it's enormous and like looks like it's built to catch wind. Just like, all the way sticking up off the back. Continuing to move back on the body toward the tail, the hips and legs were kind of weird compared to other theropods. First, the legs were generally pretty short, which again adds to that kind of ducky look. The hips are also pretty short front to back. They don't have that many sacral vertebrae, so they just don't have that many bones that make up their hips. And the ones that are there are not particularly large. And we only have well-preserved feet from one species, from what I could find, which, to be fair, is one of the weirder ones. So take this next bit with a grain of salt. All theropods, other than these ones, potentially, walk on 3 toes. You've seen Jurassic Park, the big footprint. But they have a 4th toe, which in us would be the big toe, that is sort of moved toward the back and held up off the ground. It's basically vestigial. However, unlike other theropods, the one set of Spinosaur feet that we have show that 4th toe moved back down, and they use it to walk on.
The 4th toe moved back down.
Yes.
Man, evolution's wild sometimes. How does it even happen?
Well, and it also seems like the toes may have been webbed. Put a pin in that for later.
Okay.
The tail generally also has a bit of a sail along the top, and in some species along the bottom as well. That's, taller toward the hips and gets less pronounced toward the tip of the tail. So it looks very tall top to bottom. Put a pin in that for later. And then finally, just a bit about their size. Generally speaking, these were pretty big. There are some groups of dinosaurs where, they ranged from, the size of a chicken to easily bigger than a person, for sure. And that's a pretty large size difference. And then there are some that range from maybe a little smaller than a person up to T-Rex size. This group is very much in that camp. The smallest one was somewhere between 20 and 25 feet long, around 5 feet tall at the shoulder, but long neck and heads. They were probably at 6 to 7 feet tall with where their head actually kind of sat, and around a ton. That's the minimum. On the large side, we have one of the largest non-sauropod dinosaurs, 45 to 50 feet long or so, around 8 foot tall at the shoulder, and thanks to that weird and very squat body shape, as they get bigger, they don't get a whole lot taller. They just get large. They just get round and long. And they're about 12 feet tall is about where their head was probably kept with their weird neck shape and stuff. The sail probably also topped out around 12 feet tall, and then somewhere around 7 or 8 tons, which is about as much as a large elephant.
Jeez.
So that's the general shape of Spinosaurs. Very duck-like. Legs
very duck-like, but also the size of a dinosaur or an elephant.
Yes. So let's talk about the different kinds. Depending on how you count them...
There's different kinds?
Oh, gosh.
Well, yeah, it's not just one species,
God, mother. I don't
Yeah,
think I swore on the last episode, did I?
I don't know, buddy.
All right, so I got one in the chamber. All right, let's go.
Sure. So depending on how you count them, there are somewhere between 10 and 20 genera of Spinosaurs. Genera being the plural of genus. There's always a
Jeez.
bit of this in paleontology, but this group in particular has a lot of genera that are either A, may or may not be in this group, we aren't sure, or B, might actually be the same thing as another genus in this group.
I know for a fact we've talked about this multiple times before.
Yeah. This group in particular, though, this is due to a couple of factors that we've, like Mike said, we've discussed at length on the pod before. Most of them are only known from fragmentary remains, a few bones, or in some cases a single tooth or two. Depending on which bone you have, you can be pretty confident in naming a whole species based on a single bone. You know, if you have like a partial skull, you can be pretty confident, regardless of what group of animals you're talking about. If it's a mammal, a single tooth can probably be enough because mammals do a lot of weird stuff with their teeth that are very unique species to species. With most mammals, you can't. Or most non-mammals, you can't do that. So they just don't have as many like parts to their teeth, basically. Mammals have very complicated teeth with lots of different parts. Even like a relatively complicated, at least theropod tooth, is still just kind of a point that might be bent a certain way or have a certain number of serrations and stuff. You can tell which group of theropods that's from, but naming a genus or a species off of a single tooth, you really shouldn't do that. But boy, do people still do it. Not as much in like the more recent times, but I was surprised how recent all the research on this group of dinosaurs specifically is, and that it still happened as recently as like early 2000s. Very annoying. But yeah, the other reason, so yeah, fragmentary remains and stuff. The second reason is that people ignored that. Named genera based on limited evidence anyway. And then unlike some of the more famous cases of this, though, like I said, most of the genera were published pretty recently. All of them, save for, I think, 2 or 3, named within the last, 30, 35 years. They should have known better and didn't, and that's a real bummer. So with that, let's go through some of the ones that are, most, well-known and have, actually good fossils for them. In the order that they were named. So not any kind of how they're related, just, sort of chronological order for when we found them.
Okay.
So the first one named was called Spinosaurus. It was named in 1841, so long time ago, based off of a single cone-shaped tooth from southeastern England. This was the 1840s. I could kind of give them a pass. They thought that it was from a crocodilian, and that's why they named it Spinosaurus. That means crocodile lizard. We still, to my knowledge, only have the teeth. And it wasn't until 1998, all of us were alive, when they realized, oh, this is not from a crocodilian, this is from a Spinosaur, this is a dinosaur. Like I said, I think they still only have the teeth, so not a whole lot else to say. Next, moving forward in time a bit to 1915, in Egypt, we have the genus that gives the family its name, Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is the famous one. It is the biggest, it is the weirdest, it's the one that got its own Jurassic Park movie, Jurassic Park 3, arguably the worst Jurassic Park movie. The internet says that. I kind of like it, but it also came out when I was a kid, so maybe there's some nostalgia there. Anyway. Spinosaurus is famous in the online paleontology community for having its reconstructions changed seemingly constantly. So, at first...
What is
so reconstructions is how we think the bones fit together.
Oh.
And, obviously, these days we generally know what we're doing, so it's nothing is that crazy outlandish. But I'll walk us through some of the different reconstructions. Reconstruction also sort of encompasses lifestyle as well. So when it was first found and published in the early 1900s. It was reconstructed like all the theropods were back then, walking sort of upright like a person, tail dragging on the ground, Godzilla style. Except this one was unique in that it had this big old sail on the back. This is the one that gets, elephant-sized with a 3-foot tall sail along its back.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't yet have the skull, so it was still depicted very much with that very rounded sort of T-Rex-esque skull rather than the like narrow, more crocodilian-like skull.
Mm-hmm.
Then a little bit later in the mid-1900s, it was actually depicted as being quadrupedal. It's like walking on all fours because its legs were so far back on its body and it's so big that it's like, well, it must just be so front heavy that it had to walk on all fours.
Okay.
That reconstruction has come and gone a few times since then, including hypotheses that it like knuckle walked like a gorilla to keep its claws sharp. Having theropods that are quadrupedal, I don't think has ever been like seriously suggested outside of this group and maybe even just Spinosaurus. Because famously, theropods can't twist their wrist like we do. So like their hands are stuck with the palms facing each other. So, like, being quadrupedal with that limitation is just kind of hard.
That doesn't make sense in my head.
Right. So that's why they were like, okay, they must have been, like, walking on their knuckles, because they still have very large, prominent claws. So clearly they wanted to use those for, grabbing stuff. And they must have, kept those sharp by walking on their knuckles, kind of like a gorilla. Except with the palms facing in. The general consensus now is that it likely like rested on all fours, so it would like lay down and have its arms on the ground, and that maybe would use those to like push itself back up, But it was a perfectly fine bipedal walker, albeit kind of an awkward, slow-moving one. The reason that Spinosaurus has been so weird to try to reconstruct is that by all recent information we have, Spinosaurus was living in a really weird way compared to other theropods, and especially the other giant ones. Mostly is that it was heavily attached to the water. In the last 15 years or so, we've realized through isotope studies and things that Spinosaurs in general, but especially Spinosaurus, were adapted for living in and around water. And so all those things that I told you to put a pin in earlier, let's take those pins out. So first, the jaws having a notch that slots together and having, cone-shaped teeth are really good for catching slippery prey like fish. It makes like a trap for just like, if it gets, poked by one of the teeth, you just stab through it and it's not going anywhere. Whereas if you have the more like meat slicing, knife type of teeth, it's just going to slice through it and it's going to get away potentially. This is why crocodilians today have just like simple pointy cone teeth. This is why most things like dolphins have very simple, just pointy cone shaped teeth. They're very good for catching fish. That additional toe on the ground and potential webbed feet, good for walking on marshy, loose terrain, and potentially for swimming as well. The eyes and the nostrils being at the top of the head helps you see and breathe while potentially submerged in the water, or potentially when you have like the end of your mouth in the water pretty far, waiting to catch prey while still being able to breathe, The sort of sail on the top and bottom could be helpful for swimming. We'll get to that in a second, because I have doubts. And I didn't mention it before, but Spinosaurus has notably dense bones compared to other theropods, which would be helpful for staying underwater. That would help you, sink, basically.
Right.
So all of those features led everyone to kind of believe that Spinosaurus, it's been a hot topic in dinosaur paleontology for like 10 years. Because if it was a good swimmer living mainly in the water, it would be the only known non-bird dinosaur to do that.
Yeah.
It's basically just them and penguins. And so Spinosaurus being heavily aquatic has been proposed a number of times in the 2010s. But based on the current evidence, it kind of seems like Spinosaurus could probably swim better than most dinosaurs, but wasn't like chasing down fish in the water, right? Most likely it hunted kind of like a giant heron or a crane, where it wade through like, for it, relatively shallow water. It could still be like 5-6 feet of water. And it would put its snout in the water while, its nostrils and eyes were far enough back on the head that it could put its face, like full face in the water and still breathe. And it would just kind of camp out and wait until a fish came close enough to grab. And it would grab it. And some of the fish found in its environment are big, like, saw sharks that could be like 6 feet long. So it is a very interesting dinosaur that just lives seemingly in a way unlike basically anything else. And that's why Spinosaurus has been reconstructed in so many different ways over the years.
I see.
But none of that is why Spinosaurus became famous in the first place. So like Jurassic Park 3 came out in 2003, which was way before we really knew much of this. The main thing is that A, it's really big, and B, it's got that weird spine. And so, long story short, for what is the big sail? Why is it there? What is it doing? Long story short, there are several hypotheses that all kind of make sense for what it may have done, but we don't really know. First hypothesis, mainly that it was used for thermoregulation, either warming up or cooling down. This was popular early on because we hadn't yet learned that dinosaurs were mostly warm-blooded. So having a big solar panel on your back to warm yourself up faster in the morning would be really useful. Nowadays, if anything, it may have been used to help cool down instead of warm up. Large animals make and maintain a lot of heat because they just have a large volume. They can be prone to overheating. So now instead of a solar panel, think of it more as like a radiator to get rid of extra heat.
Interesting.
There have been hypotheses that it was used for fat storage to help get through long months with little food, like during a dry season.
I feel like that's probably where I would think, like a camel.
Yeah, because a lot of them, even though they're found in river environments, basically all of them are, but this time in the Cretaceous, climate was doing some weird things, so this could just be an extra way for them to, the dry season lasts a few weeks longer than it normally does, but you have this big old fat storage on your back to sort of help you get through that. Potentially. I don't think there's a whole lot of like direct evidence for that. It's just kind of one of those things that's like, it would make sense if they could use it that way. It's also just a giant billboard that they could have used for display.
Yeah.
It could have been brightly colored. When they pumped blood into it, reptiles in general are really good at moving blood around their bodies kind of at will. This could have made Spinosaurus look even bigger than it was, which at first doesn't make a ton of sense because, like I said, it's one of the biggest non-sauropod dinosaurs ever. However, it has brothers and sisters and cousins and things that are the same size as it. But also, it lived at the same time and place as another one of the largest theropods ever, called Carcharodontosaurus. They ate different stuff, so they didn't like compete for food, but they definitely lived in the same places and likely fought for territory. So looking even bigger and meaner with that big sail could have helped scare away those guys.
Yeah.
And lastly, the weirdest hypothesis is that it somehow helped with swimming and catching food in the water. This is the one that I am unsure about.
Yeah, okay.
So, Some people still think this is the case, including like very recent studies, like in the 2020s. Other than a handful of people, it seems like everyone else is like, I don't think so, man. But these same handful of people are like, no, trust. But especially because we just don't think that's how it was catching food, was like swimming and chasing things in the water. So these authors propose that the sail helped keep it upright while in the water, which, probably is true. That would help.
But was it the main thing?
Right, exactly. But they also said that it is shaped kind of similarly to like the dorsal fins of certain fish, like sailfish, which, like, if you squint, I guess. And sailfish use that to corral fish into a bait ball and hunt them that way. So they basically pop it up to make them look bigger than they are, and they use that to sort of swim around the fish to sort of cluster them all together in a big ball. Yeah. And then they'll just like shoot through the middle of the ball of fish, and they're just like shooting fish in a barrel that way. And they're very good at this. They also work together doing that. To suggest that Spinosaurus did this, which from what I could tell the authors did, I have no idea what they're basing that on, because there's no way Spinosaurus could swim that fast.
Yeah. To
make that like effective. Nor like would there even be really enough fish in the rivers and lakes to make a bait ball like that? Yeah. I wouldn't think anyway.
No.
So, in my opinion, very questionable hypothesis, but you might see it if you look into it. But honestly, that's very stereotypical of Spinosaurus in general. You'll see some crazy stuff out there. Take everything with a grain of salt.
Yep.
So that is like 2 whole pages of my notes, all about just Spinosaurus. But I want to touch a couple more quick things before we move on to anybody else. So first, just like a month ago, this is why I picked this for this episode. A new species of Spinosaurus was published. That's pretty uncommon. Most dinosaur genera are monotypic, which means they only have one species. There's a handful that are not, but most of them only have one species. The first one that has been known, like I said, since 1915, that is Spinosaurus aegypticus, named that because it was found in Egypt. The new one was found in Niger, and is called Spinosaurus mirabilis, which means astonishing, referring to the very prominent head crest, which Spinosaurus aegypticus does not have. It has a head crest, but the one on the new one, mirabilis, comes almost to like a spike. It has a crest that's like, and it curves like back forward almost, kind of like a big C shape on the top of its head.
Mm-hmm.
So very strange, but otherwise seemingly very similar aside from that.
And how much of the fossil do they have?
That I don't know. Definitely not a full skeleton.
Okay.
But just based on like the size of the skull and stuff like that, it seems to be basically the same size as Spinosaurus aegypticus, the old one. Just had a weird crest on its head.
Yeah.
There are a few, moving on to our second point here of our little quick extras. There are a few other genera that may or may not actually also just be Spinosaurus. There's a genus called Sigelmassasaurus, which is known from the same places and times as Spinosaurus in Morocco. That's where most Spinosaurus fossils are found, is in Morocco. The much more interesting one, though, is a genus called Oxalia, which is from the same time, but over in Brazil. South America was pretty close to Africa at the time. A lot closer than today. Some people have proposed that Oxalia is the same thing as Spinosaurus. This one's a bit more disputed. It seems like it's probably different, but worth mentioning. If it is different, it was basically extremely similar size to Spinosaurus, but living in Brazil. So there was other giant Spinosaurs living it up in South America. Next, Spinosaurus is actually the youngest Spinosaur. It was the last one hanging on into the late Cretaceous and went extinct around 93 million years ago or so. It was doing something better than all of its cousins that made it last the longest, but it was the last member of its group, pretty much. And lastly, just a fun fact that I like throwing out whenever I talk about Spinosaurus. The original, called the holotype, this is sort of like the first set of fossils that the species was named based on, are gone. They were blown up in World War II because they were in a museum in Berlin.
Oh, God.
So we did that.
Jeez.
We did that.
You know what? No. I'm not even gonna say we did that. That's the Germans' fault. I'm gonna blame Germany for World War II.
Fair enough. I don't know why we had to bomb the museum. But
I'm not disagreeing with that, but I don't know. You guys started that, is all I'm gonna say.
That's totally fair. All right, moving on to other genera now, as fun as Spinosaurus is. Next, we have Baryonyx, found in England in the 1980s. So we go all the way from 1915 to the 1980s. But there's also been, it may or may not also be in Spain and Portugal. That is potentially a different genus, but very similar. Finding Baryonyx is what made them realize that Suchosaurus, the one from the 1840s, wasn't a crocodilian. This is what made them realize, oh shoot, that's a dinosaur. So not only was it one of the earliest studied Spinosaurs, it was also one of the earliest Spinosaurs around, like in evolutionary order, around 130 million years ago. Baryonyx was medium-sized for Spinosaurs, so still pretty big. 25 feet long, 1 to 2 tons, 5 to 6 feet tall at the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Looked a lot like Spinosaurus, with a much, much shorter spine on the back, more of a ridge than a sail. It also didn't have much of a tail sail, which Spinosaurus has. It had a much more normal theropod-looking tail. And its name, Baryonyx, means heavy claw. The first claw on the first finger was absolutely enormous compared to the other two. It's a foot long.
Wow.
And this was the first dinosaur known to have been mostly piscivorous, meaning that it eats fish. At this point, we hadn't found more good Spinosaurus fossils yet. So it was well, the ones we had are gone. Bummer. So it was through Baryonyx that the rest of the Spinosaurs kind of were oh, these guys are weird.
Uh-huh.
And it's been found with fish scales in its stomach, so not only is it its face is definitely for eating fish, but also with direct evidence of fish scales in its stomach. But there's also been specimens found with bones of other dinosaurs in its stomach, so while it mostly ate fish, it would hunt stuff other times, which isn't really all that surprising. Some evidence kind of suggests that it might have been a good swimmer. It had kind of dense bones like Spinosaurus had to help it stay underwater, but it didn't have any of the other kind of weird, potentially aquatic adaptations that Spinosaurus had that make people think that it was a good aquatic hunter. Next, from Brazil in 1996, we have one of the best scientific names out there, Irritator challengeri. Sometimes naming species can be fun. They named it Irritator because the fossils had been damaged by the collectors, and the paleontologists were angry about it.
That's just pettiness is why we have this particular name. Correct. That's incredible. Well done.
And they named it. Unfortunately, I thought the challengeri was gonna be because it was challenging to work with. No, they named it after somebody whose last name is Challenger, a character from an Arthur Conan Doyle book. Sure. It evolved toward the end of the Spinosaurus time, so in the very late early Cretaceous, around 110 million years ago. This was the smallest well-preserved one, only around 20, 25 feet long, about a ton, 5 foot tall at the shoulder. So nothing particularly unique about this guy. Just a fun name, and also just like shows more than, it wasn't just like a couple that were living in South America, because like I said, this one was from Brazil. There's a good handful across both Africa and South America. Then we'll talk about in a little bit Eurasia as well. Oh yeah, Baryonyx being from potentially Portugal and Spain, but mainly England. So they were kind of all over the place, except for North America. Next, back to Africa in 1998. From Niger, we have Suchomimus. Literally means crocodile mimic, because of how similar to how similar Spinosaurs are to crocodilians with their teeth and some other parts of the skull. From around, it was from around the middle of the Spinosaurus time, around 120 to 110 million years ago. One of the bigger ones, around 30, 35 feet long, about 7 foot tall at the shoulder, between like 2.5 to 4 tons or so. Had a pretty tall sail, like much more prominent than on Baryonyx, but definitely much smaller than on Spinosaurus. Suchomimus is interesting because even for Spinosaurs, it had notably beefy arms and big claws. And it's like not just like the arms were long, but all of the muscle attachment points show that these were incredibly strong arms. The most likely suggestion that I saw was that because their snouts are so long and narrow, they're not very good at resisting like twisting stress. Like if they had like a big squirming fish in their mouth, they're not good at not breaking when they're twisted like side to side.
That makes sense.
So I think they would either grab the fish with their mouth and then hug it to grab it with those big claws. Because, like I said earlier, like all dinosaurs, they couldn't twist their wrists, so they had to just hug it.
Mm-hmm.
It may have also been used for them to dig for water, like during the dry season, or potentially digging nests, because there's various features on the arms that are common in like other digging species. Like their elbow, so like if you feel your elbow, that bone, that like sort of rounded lump there, is called the olecranon process. That is very long and pronounced in a lot of burrowing or digging species, because that's what gives you your leverage for moving your forearm. And this was huge on these guys. So they were clearly doing something weird with their arms.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, leaving Africa again, we have Ichthyovenator, which was found in Laos in 2012, which is a very fun sounding name. I like this name a lot.
Me too.
It means fish hunter. This is one of the younger genera, but not quite making it into the late Cretaceous, so like around 110 million years ago. We don't have a whole lot of the skeleton, but what we have is interesting. It's on like the medium to small side, around 30 feet long, 7 foot at the shoulder, about 2.5 tons. But what makes it interesting is that the best fossils we have come from like the hip area, and the sail looked really weird there. They seem to have had like a divot in the sail over the hips, where it was like tall over the back like normal, and then got really short for like 2 vertebrae over the hips, and then got tall again over the tail. Everything I've seen is like very confident that this is not from like it got hurt and like that part got bit off or something, or like bad fossil preservation. This just seems like this is what it was like.
Yeah.
The neural spines that make up the sail are also kind of weird shaped. In almost all the other genera, they're more or less just perfectly rectangular. So like the tops, it stays like the same width from like top to bottom. But these ones got like wider at the top. So these guys were doing something weird with their sail, but we don't really know what, because we don't have a lot of like the front half of the skeleton. And then just to sort of round us off here,
Mm-hmm.
A a brief bit about their evolution. I said I wasn't going to talk much about it, but I want to talk a little. And the reason we're not going much into it is because they're weird. And the like larger group, so like Spinosauridae, is a member of a larger group called the Megalosauridae, or Megalosauroidea.
There you go.
There we go.
You can do it.
Thank you. And that has kind of historically been what we in the biz call a wastebasket taxon.
Oh.
That means, basically, if it's a theropod from the Middle Jurassic through the Middle Cretaceous and doesn't clearly belong somewhere else, you just kind of toss it in here.
Well.
Don't know what it is? Probably a megalosauroid. Obviously, that's not helpful.
Right.
Don't do that. What that ends up meaning is that a lot of dinosaurs that probably are not actually related are thrown into like the various computer models that we use to build family trees, and it makes the whole group harder to figure out because there's just a lot of stuff in there that shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that can kind of confuse the models. So we don't have a good transition sequence from like the more like normal run-of-the-mill style theropod to weird Spinosaurs. The first things that we have, like earliest in the fossil record, that look like Spinosaurs.
Yep.
So, what's more interesting, in my opinion, is where they may have evolved. Because being in Africa and South America makes sense. Because, like I said, they were at least very closely connected, or very, very recently departed, if not fairly some occasionally connected, depending on sea level changes and stuff. But being in Africa, South America, and also Eurasia makes a bit less sense. Because Eurasia and Africa were not terribly close back then. It especially doesn't make sense because Spinosaurs kind of just show up in all of these places at about the same time. So it's not like, oh, we see the first ones in Eurasia, then they show up, a couple million years later in Africa, then a couple million years later in South America. But yeah, so there's not really like a nice, satisfying path of like their, where they lived over time. They kind of just all show up at the same time, all looking like Spinosaurs, which is just another way that they're kind of weirdos. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just from start to finish, Spinosaurs are just strange. And another thing that's strange is that Mike's power went out, so he's not going to be here to send us off.
Yes, unfortunately.
But thankfully, he, unlike me, he records on a laptop, which honestly is probably smarter. Because if my power goes out while we're recording, we're screwed.
Same here.
So, but yeah, do you have any last questions or thoughts about these guys? Just like a real weird group of dinosaurs.
No, man. I mean, like, they're just, like you said, weird, and I just don't really understand them, and I don't think that as a society we really understand them quite that well either. Yeah, they're like basically the only thing that we're pretty sure about is that they generally mostly ate fish. Yep.
How much they lived like fish, unsure. But yeah, very fun, very memeable. There's been lots of memes and jokes where it's like, people making like AI monstrosities, be like, this is what people will be proposing Spinosaurus looked like in 2030. There's been some where like people have jokingly proposed that it like looked like an elephant seal, where it's like the spine was connected by like a giant hunk of fat to the neck. So like their neck wasn't mobile. It was like in line with the spine, and there was skin connecting like the spine to the neck. And It also had like a big elephant seal trunk. So it was just very like round. And again, not serious proposals, but just memes.
Right.
Because of how weird it is, it's very memeable. And this paleontology community is always just kind of weird online anyway. But yeah. So that's Spinosaurs. Thanks for listening. And I haven't done an outro in a while, and I'm forgetting how we do it. Thank you all for listening. We will be back in 2 weeks with an episode all about the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. We will see you then. I have been Gavin. That has been Fia. Mike is wandering around in the dark. And we will see you all in 2 weeks. Until then, take care, everybody.
Bye.
This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Gavin Davidson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Fenella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.